TJ Hockenson has a new contract that will keep him in Minnesota, among a bunch of other stuff that gets the Vikings ready for free agency. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today is the last show you're going to hear on Locked On Vikings before the tampering window opens, which will happen later today, 3 p.m. Central Time. So free agency news will come out. So here's first off how we're going to do this. There's a live squad show on Monday morning. There's also a squad show on Thursday morning. As usual, I will be live 3 times this week at night on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. You will see more about that. 10 p.m. on YouTube, 10 p.m. Central on YouTube, going live to discuss whatever goes down in the opening minutes of the tampering window, and we will be continuing to do that throughout the week. And I think I can probably just say that there's more long-term announcements coming on that, so make sure you tune in, but the audio will be up on the Locked On Vikings feed for all of this stuff after the fact, so if you miss it, you can always catch up later. Things we have to talk about today. There's a whole bunch. TJ Hockenson does his contract redo. The Vikings restructured a whole bunch of other deals. We still have more rumors circulating around whether or not the Vikings are going to trade Jonathan Grenard. They seem to be very much in talks with teams to do that. There is a lot of interest from around the league to do that. So I kind of feel like it is going to happen. And then I want to update you on some of the cash versus cap stuff that I talked about now that they have restructured a couple of contracts and that TJ Hockenson did a pay cut. What does it mean for that? But I think what we might spend the majority of the episode on is ranking the Vikings needs. The Vikings needs are now pretty much set up. I think that we have seen the last of the contract, get under the cap stuff that they're going to do. They're well under the salary cap for 2026. They're compliant. They've got a little bit of room to work with, and we'll talk about where they stand as well as what they need to do now in the next 3 to 4 days where the vast majority of free agency happens. So everybody buckle up. We're in for a ride, and there's going to be so much content on Locked On Vikings for you. So let's start with the TJ Hockenson contract redo. As of this recording, I don't have all the details, but I think I have enough to know more or less what happened. Hockenson agrees to a new deal that reduces his cap hit by $5 million. It also voids 2027. So they've canceled the 2027 season for TJ Hockenson. He will become a free agent at the end of this year, the way this contract works now. So there's 2 different ways that the cap hit for this year could be reduced. They could have either done a signing bonus conversion of salary, the restructure that we talk about all the time, that if they did it with about half of his base salary for 26, that would do, that would be the salary cap reduction that we're talking about. And then that money would be paid off next year when he voids out. Or he agreed to a real true blue pay cut. It sounds like it's the latter. It sounds like he actually agreed, yes, I will take a pay cut of $5 million, but this contract sucks for me now, and we're just going to be back at this table again next year, and I'm not going to be interested in it, so commit to cutting me now. That is the way that I feel this went down. I'm guessing a little bit, I'm speculating a little bit, but the way that it's been reported, it sounds to me like TJ Hockenson agreed to a pay cut, but next year, 2027, was the same base salary, no guarantees at all, and we would have been right back at this negotiating table. So if it was going to come down to that again, he could say, I'll take the pay cut now, but I'm not going to take it next year. And if that means that you're going to come to me with the same ultimatum, pay cut, or we're going to release you as a cap casualty, then why don't we just flip that switch now? Why don't we just commit to it as it stands? So look, there's nothing stopping the Vikings from changing course, turning around, signing a different extension to TJ Hockenson over the course of the next calendar year, but I highly doubt that happens. If his 2027 is voided out at his request, by the way, it was some local beat person that it was either Gessling or Seifert or Alec Lewis. I'm so sorry, I forget who it was, but somebody did report that Hockenson was the one that requested for 2027 to be wiped out. So if he's requesting for 2027 to be wiped out, I am guessing that he is going to leave. So this will be the last year of TJ Hockenson in a Vikings jersey. But as it stands right now, that puts the Vikings in a better cap situation. They also restructured a few contracts. I was going pretty hard at them last week for refusing to restructure the contracts of Jonathan Grenard and Jonathan Allen, two defensive linemen I felt were really important to the success of the Vikings defense that now appear to be headed elsewhere. None of these guys have been officially cut yet between Jones, Allen, and Javon Hargrave. They are going to be cut at the start of the new league year, which will be Wednesday. So it'll still be a little bit. There's still time for trades to happen. If somebody strikes out in the tampering window on their favorite defensive tackle prospect, maybe they go give the Vikings a call and you can get a trade done. It also allows you to like post June stuff if you cut them later, but before the March 15th, March 13th guarantee triggers happen that are in some of these contracts, so it'll happen in that window. But you wouldn't see the news be like officially, oh yeah, they're cut until that time. So don't freak out that you haven't seen that. The restructured contracts are Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, and Byron Murphy. And the thing that those contracts have in common is that they all had a bunch of guaranteed salary this year that had already been kind of locked in at signing. So that's really important for the cash discussions that we've had. Usually when you restructure a contract, by the way, I made a YouTube short about this if you saw it, but I'll go over the gist of that here as well. Usually when you restructure a contract, you give out like a lump sum, right? It's a salary to signing bonus conversion. When I say restructure, I'm almost always talking about taking somebody's salary and converting it into a signing bonus. You can do this without the player's consent, mostly because every player loves that. It's getting a salary advance. Everybody is super happy about it. But it counts differently on the cap because it prorates across all the years. So you get the cap hit down, but in terms of actual cash flow, what happens is if I'm going to pay a player, $10 million throughout this whole year, and then I convert $8 million of that to signing bonus, you just got an $8 million bonus just for doing nothing. You just sit down. Players will find out that they got this like at the same time as like people on Twitter will. And they'll be like, oh, sweet, I got $8 million. Like nobody's mad about it. So that's usually what facilitates the salary cap maneuvering that the Vikings and Rob Brzezinski loves to do, is giving out a bunch of signing bonuses all the time. And the difference is when that money is guaranteed at signing, the cash flows through a little bit of a different thing. When you sign somebody like Justin Jefferson to a big giga extension, and you guarantee so much money at signing, right? I forget what it was, but it's $100 million at signing, just to keep it an easy number. And you take that $100 million and you have to produce that $100 million liquid at signing. You have to be able to take it now and put it into an escrow account. It doesn't actually go to Justin Jefferson at the time, but it is set aside in a locked account where it's going to be paid out when it's supposed to. That way, if the owners sell the team, if the NFL goes under, if the apocalypse happens, and like nothing can take that money away. It is guaranteed. It is gone. And it is set aside no matter what anybody does. There can be no shenanigans. So that's just the way that this works, is that money goes off into an escrow account. So when you restructure that money, it's money that has already been spent in the last 2 years that is actually turning into the signing bonus. It still has the same effect on the salary cap. So you're still getting under the cap by doing these restructures. But from a cash flow perspective, it doesn't put nearly as much of a burden on ownership as the other ones did. So more and more, it appears that the Vikings decision-making is influenced by cash flow rather than salary cap, which is a change in which is like, it goes against the history of the Wilfs, that they've always prioritized cap over cash. And it feels like this offseason is a little bit different. There is, I think, a reason why it is this year. And it's not just that this is the year that they fired Kwesi and they don't have a GM. There actually is a reason for it to be specifically 2026, which I will go over in just a second. But just so you know where the Vikings are at after this whole thing is said and done. If I've done this right in the salary cap calculator, I am again doing the, I haven't done Harrison Smith yet, but with Ryan Kelly retiring, the 3 cuts that have been reported, Allen, Hargrave, Aaron Jones, the TJ Hockenson renegotiation, and the 3 restructures we talked about. And then with Jonathan Grenard getting traded straight up with no money change. It would put the Vikings at $41 million in cap space for 2026 and $111 million in 2027. They've got a lot to do. They've got a lot of needs, and the interesting thing is that the Vikings, in terms of cash flow, I'm going to be really interested to see just how aggressive they want to get here, because they have already met the floor without spending anything else for what they need to spend. And I'll explain what I mean by that next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Indeed. Hey, if you don't want to be where the Vikings are, don't hire the wrong person, maybe. Indeed Sponsored Jobs is there to help you do just that. To get your hire right the first time by exposing your job posting to as many people as possible. Get it out in front of the world so that whoever does have the right skills and is the right candidate will actually see it. You have a position that is still sitting open that hasn't had the kind of people come across that you're looking for. Check out Indeed Sponsored Jobs. In the minute that I'm talking to you about Indeed Sponsored Jobs, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. The Everydayer Club is still going hard. We have our free agency promo going out right now with code FREEAGENCY, all one word. You get a month free. It's normally $5 a month or $50 a year, and you can get ad-free episodes of Locked On Vikings, access to a special Discord server where Locked On hosts are cutting it up, and much more. And right now you can get the first month of that free with code FREEAGENCY, or there's a link in the show notes with it all set up for you. Moving on, I do want to make one quick point about the cash before we get into the Vikings' needs. And I just want to show you the math about the spending floor. So the way that the collective bargaining agreement, this is going to be so deep, by the way, you do not have to worry about this at all if you just want to know who the Vikings are going to sign at running back or whatever. But for those of you that like to nickel and dime it, that like to track everything. So the CBA essentially divided this decade into groups of 3 years. 2024 to 2026 is one of those divisions. So between 2024, 2025 and 2026, you have to average 90% of the salary cap in terms of cash spent. That is the floor. If you don't, there's a bunch of penalties. That's the way the CBA works. So if you add up huge spending years of 24 and 25 with a very, very low spending year in 26, essentially it allows the Wilfs as businessmen to lower costs like crazy for this fiscal year without breaking the rules because of how much they spent last year. I'll give you the actual numbers. So the salary cap, that 90% average, means that you have to average over the last 3 years, you have to average about $250 million in spending. So you have to spend over the last 3 years, $750 million. I'm rounding a little bit, but about $750 mil on your players. In 2024, the Vikings spent $279 mil, and in 2025, they very famously spent $345 mil. These are all numbers from Over the Cap, by the way. So if you add that all up, they've spent $625 of the $750 mil they need to spend. So they're only about $125 mil short of that, and there will not be a team, even if the season started tomorrow and nobody changed anything, there would not be a team spending less than that. The Raiders are the only ones remotely close right now, and I'm sure that will go up as free agency goes down. So put it this way, the money that they're already scheduled to pay via salaries to players that are already on the roster, that are between guys like on rookie deals and stuff, and all that stuff. Add that all up, and the Vikings are already compliant with the cash spending floor. Now that's a minimum. That's not like a target number. It's a minimum, but there is absolutely no incentive coming from that for the Vikings to spend more. So now, the reason that exists is to keep there from being like an Oakland A's at the RIP, or a Twins Pollard situation like the MLB is dealing with, where you get people that are like, why would I spend money on players? People buy tickets no matter if they're good or bad, so I'm just going to cut costs. that's the point of that spending floor. But because of how the Vikings have kind of min-maxed it, they aren't going to have that same incentive. Will that change the way that they are going to approach all of free agency? Meh. I don't think entirely, but it is something to keep in mind as you wonder about how much they're going to front load the cash flow of contracts and backload contracts. Like, the Vikings could be incredibly aggressive in free agency if they wanted to, if they could sign a ton of people with really backloaded contracts, but those backloaded contracts would rely on big signing bonuses that would require the Wilfs to spend a bunch of money. So to hit the same spending floor minimums that are going to happen for 27, 28, 29, that are going to be bigger numbers because cap go up, they're going to have the liquid money and whatever their budget is going to have to be able to support that, right? So what I basically am saying is that the spending spree that they went on last year, and to a lesser degree 2024, but really the one last year where they spent $345 million and it led the league, is something that they are trying to financially recover from. That is the vibe that I am getting here. And I'm speculating I'm reading tea leaves based on the way that they have approached this stuff, because I just kind of refuse to believe that it is on merit that they do not want to pay Jonathan Grenard and Jonathan Allen. I just think that that's a little bit too crazy, especially for a guy like Brian Flores. I refuse to believe that Brian Flores doesn't think Jonathan Grenard is worth $5 more million that it would take to get him up per year to get him up to a more market reflective contract. No, I think that, well, for Grenard's case, I think that he's coming off a shoulder surgery, which did happen because he played through an injury in a lost season, and he re-aggravated what was a minor shoulder injury. He hurt the same one. And that is potentially depressing his value. He's also just underpaid based on the market. There are much worse edge rushers than him making much more money, and that should be corrected. And for saying that, the team just said they were going to trade him. They leaked a trade rumor, and that kind of fractures the relationship. Plus, they got so many bites on that it's really difficult to see the Vikings saying no to everybody. It seems like there's enough of a bidding war happening that eventually somebody's going to get a deal, an offer in that the Vikings are satisfied with. So that's going to make for some needs. That's going to make for an interesting time where the Vikings roster is pretty barren. And it always is the most barren on the day before the tampering window open, or the morning the tampering window opens. That's when everybody looks the most barren. You only know who's going to leave, and you don't know who's going to come. But if you go down the list of the roster and you look at where the Vikings have a need from, they need a quarterback, they need a new running back to replace Aaron Jones, a wide receiver 3 to replace Naylor, a center, and so on. You go through all of that. What is actually the most important thing? That's what I want to get into now. But before we do it, let me just kind of talk to you about how I'm looking at this, because I'm looking at 26 and 27. By 2027, the Vikings will be down to, by my count, 10 of their starting players. And I was very generous with the word starter. That list includes guys like Josh Oliver and Theo Jackson that started some, but probably don't figure to, you might even not argue that they're starters at all. And will they be starters in 2027 is a real question. McCarthy is on that list. Also very much a question of, will he be starting for the Vikings in 2027? A lot of people don't even think he's going to be on the roster. But I'm just talking about where the contracts are. They are currently scheduled to be. There are only 10 players: McCarthy, Justin Jefferson, Josh Oliver, Christian Darrisaw, Donovan Jackson, Will Fries, Dallas Turner, Byron Murphy, Josh Metellus, Theo Jackson. If I forgot somebody, I super apologize. By 2027. So essentially everybody else is either leaving right now or headed into a contract year. Now that you have TJ Hockenson reworked the way that he is reworked, and guys like Brian O'Neill, you can do a lot to change that, right? Jordan Addison, for example, is scheduled to become a free agent after 20. He's currently, quote unquote, scheduled to enter a contract year, but his 5th-year option will probably get picked up. So that list will expand. By this time next year, we're not going to be going like, oh my God, they need 20 guys. But that will also change the cap. So of that $111 million number in 2027, that sounds super exciting. They're going to be flush with cash. Well, the 5th-year option for Addison comes out of that. Whatever multi-year deals they sign here is going to come out in the next week in free agency. That's going to come out of that. Whoever they trade for or whatever, that's going to come out of that. So The numbers will all change. Obviously, it's always super fluid and it's moving around, but the Vikings have a ton of needs. When you see a number that is 9 digits on somebody's salary cap space, that means they don't have a roster. That means they don't got any players. So thinking both in terms of this year, but if I am to kind of forget this year, if I am to say the Vikings are finally doing the thing that everyone's been begging them to do, and they're going to take one off and, reset their cap and reset everything and just kind of like resolve to suck one year. Boy, that's going to be rough to get through for me. But I guess if that's what they're doing, that's what they're doing. Then we have to look at the prospects for 2027 as well, where the Vikings are basically all liquid. It's all resources, but no players. And now you have to turn that into an actual roster that's worth a damn. So what should they prioritize? And when should they prioritize it all for between free agency and the draft? That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find tickets to concerts, sporting events, comedy shows, whatever's in your area. Look, we can stream anything. We can order food on our phones. You got supercomputers in your pockets. And yet somehow buying tickets to a live event is still like the biggest nightmare imaginable, where you have a big long line and then you've got fees jumping on you at checkout. That is why I use Gametime. It gives the fans the advantage and it makes getting tickets simple, whether it's NFL games, concerts, comedy, or whatever you're into. On the Gametime app, you can see panoramic views from your seat, make sure you're satisfied with the view, and all of the fees are included in the price right on the front of the app. So what you see is what you pay. No funny business. 2 taps, boom, you got great tickets locked in. Fast, easy, done. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. All right, so let's actually rank out these needs. What do the Vikings need the most? What is the emergency? Well, the first thing that needs to get done, and it kind of sounds like it already is quarterback. That's obviously the priority number one. Nobody's going to argue with that, but it also is like already kind of handshaking about it. It sounds like Kyler Murray and the Vikings are crash coursing toward a veteran minimum deal that's going to have him here, and he's going to come compete with JJ McCarthy, or if you want to put quotes around that, you can, but you're probably going to be told that they're competing. But whatever, right? That's the thing. So the Kyler Murray thing, get that done. Got to get that done. Assuming that that is as done as it needs to be. The other kind of immediate needs, I guess I will say, things where you don't have a starter right now, or you don't have anybody who has started before right now. Look, if Ty Felton wants to take the Jalen Naylor role and he can do it, great, but you still probably need to get somebody in there to make him compete for that. You need to replace Aaron Jones. Like you need a running back, and they're going to get a running back. They've been sniffing around running backs quite a bit. There was a ton of steam around it at the combine, and so I imagine that one of the premier names ends up in purple, or if they strike out on all of those guys, they'll still sign some veteran running back. Wide receiver 3 I talked about. Like, you need a center, right? You need a starting center. If they just throw in Michael Juergens, I would be shocked. You need 2 different defensive tackles. They have Jalen Redmond, but they like to do base packages in Flores' defense with 3 defensive tackles. So you need 2 guys that can play, 50% at least of the snaps. I would say a starter and like kind of a rotational guy is what you want. So you need 1 D tackle, and then like the wide receiver 3 of D tackles, like the guy that's like on the field most of the time, but is not necessarily expected to be the superstar. You also have defensive end in Grenard that, in replacing Grenard, that is kind of an arguable need. I'll circle back to that one in a sec. You need a linebacker. The Vikings have not yet tendered Ivan Pace. They still have time to do so, but you either have to do that, and then that's your solution to the problem, or you have to find a different one. Either way, it's on the list. You need a 3rd cornerback. The Vikings currently have Byron Murphy and Isaiah Rodgers, and that's it in terms of like projected people who will play. And I would argue 2 safeties. I don't think Theo Jackson is the guy for the Vikings. They benched him pretty outright. They are excited about Jay Ward. He might be one of those guys, but even then you still need another one to replace what you thought you were getting with Theo Jackson and what you're likely losing if Harrison Smith does indeed retire. Those are the 2026 needs of, we're losing a guy, somebody is leaving, we need somebody else to play this position. But then you have the next year needs that are still worth thinking about right now, even if they're draft needs. Maybe that's more like tight end. You're going to need a tight end. It's going to be Josh Oliver and a dream in 2027, and drafting a tight end this offseason now just became a really important idea, and defensive end did as well, with not only Jonathan Grenard probably getting traded, if that indeed happens, but Andrew Van Ginkel, who's also on the last year of a deal. He voids out in 2027. So you'll have just Dallas Turner on the team. You need somebody. And if you want that guy to be young, you got to draft him now. You don't want that guy to be like a rookie coming in right in the first second and then all that pressure's on him. You need another linebacker in 2027 as Blake Cashman's contract voids out. Isaiah Rodgers is going into a contract year, so you need another cornerback. Brian O'Neill is in a contract year. You need a right tackle. And Jordan Mason's in a contract year, so you actually need another running back next year as well. So those are needs. Like, look, if those become, if nothing gets done about it this year, you still have all of it next offseason to deal with it. But those are things that I could see the Vikings looking at from a draft perspective of just like, hey, you kind of draft for next year. You do free agency for this year in a general sense. Plus, the way the markets are turning out. There's a lot of interesting centers on the market that are out for, there's been like some movement already, guys being released, guys like Tyler Linderbaum out there, kind of inflating that. Like, it's a fairly robust center market. It's a decent year to need a center. That is the other thing. I don't think I mentioned that actually because I think it happened after the Friday show went up, but Ryan Kelly's retirement is now officially did announce that he is retiring. That was something that I was kind of penciling in the whole time that we all expected. But yeah, man, 6 concussions. I truly hope that his health, like that he continues to lead a healthy and happy life, because that can be very, very, very scary. And I hope the scary stuff isn't something that he has to spend a lot of time thinking about. And what a career. Quite a bit to tip your cap to, most of it in Indianapolis, but still. So you need a center right now and in 2027, right? So that becomes the emergency. So let's rank these real quick, okay? I think I'm going to put quarterback on the top. That's pretty obvious, right? I think I'm going to put center next. Like, you do not have you have Michael Juergens right now. Like, that's not good enough. Even if you only did those two, and like D tackle at least still has Jalen Redmond, getting a guy next to him is my next priority. And then running back one, somebody to kind of share the load with Jordan Mason. Then I have linebacker. It's probably not going to be Pace starting, even if they do tender him and keep him around, which I still think they should as depth, but I don't know, maybe the coaches are just sick of that guy. They did bench him. Like, that doesn't sit well with someone. Maybe he doesn't want to be here anymore, and he would be well within his rights to say, don't tender me. I don't want this. So figuring out linebacker would be 5th on my list, and then another safety would be next on my list. That is, of course, this is where we get to the part where there are needs that we aren't 100% sure are going to be needs, but probably where, that's Harrison Smith and then Jonathan Grenard trade. They could still like repair that relationship. I don't know if they're going to do that, and it doesn't seem like they have a lot of incentive to, but like those things are not necessarily huge needs. But if they do trade Grenard away, you have Van Ginkel, you have Dallas Turner. Van Ginkel on a contract here. I don't see a world where you don't add another defensive end to that room to help kind of shore things up. Even if Dallas Turner makes a huge leap, or you're just happy, you're so high on him that you're happy with him as is. Even if you take those like really optimistic positions, you still probably want another body to rotate out with those guys, right? So we'll see the how high octane that is, but because Van Ginkel's on a contract year, defensive end becomes a big draft need to me. Like, that becomes something that they should probably aim at high. Like, this is a draft need that's not a 6th rounder. Like, this should be somebody in the top 100. After that, I say the third safety, the improve upon Theo Jackson, please position, and then another defensive tackle, of course. Actually, I should probably put D tackle over safety 3, because that guy's gonna play, right? Like, that's now your kind of Dean Lowry role. A cornerback 3, a wide receiver 3. So you get a lot of you need a couple of those like rotational types, and a fullback too. It's very possible that the Vikings still want to go with a fullback. I think you could probably have someone like Josh Oliver do a lot of that stuff if you want to take advantage of those angles, but you also need someone in protection with running back, which is a huge thing. Between Aaron Jones and CJ Ham, the Vikings are losing a lot of their pass protection plan. CJ Ham was the 3rd down pass protector. So you need someone who you trust in pass pro, in the backfield regardless. And that hasn't really been Jordan Mason. So you need somebody for that. So I'll put fullback on that list as well. And then for the 2027 needs, I think the defensive end and tight end are the biggest ones, right? And then in terms of situations you got to figure out, you got to decide, are we going to extend Isaiah Rodgers and Brian O'Neill? I think those kinds of decisions are summer things. This not going to happen right now. They don't need it for the cap right now. They don't need to do any of that. But those are, let's do this. Let's do the draft. Everybody's going to take a break in the summer. And then when everybody shows up to camp, usually their agents come to the building too. And that's when those negotiations take place. So like Brian O'Neill, Isaiah Rodgers, anybody else you think that deserves an extension, Jalen Redmond probably, that's when those negotiations will go down. Jalen Redmond's got the tender right now. He's in the building. It's all good. But if you want to sign him long term and you want to do it based off of the 2025 season, you invite his agent and say, hey, we're kicking up camp here on, July, whatever. If come on down to the building, we'll set up a meeting. And that's when that negotiation tends to happen. Okay, so I will talk to you very shortly. Tampering is going to open in a few hours after this episode comes out. And then at 10 p.m. Central, I will be live again and we'll talk about whatever it is that happened, or even if it's nothing, it's all good. But I have a feeling we'll get Kyler Murray news between now and then. So, or if we didn't, that'll probably be something to talk about. So I will see you all very soon, later at night. And as always, up. Nope. Don't go anywhere. Wait, news broke. After I recorded, but before I finished editing, news broke that Eric Wilson has re-signed with the Vikings. That changes a lot about what I was just talking about with regard to linebacker. It's a 3-year deal, so now you've got a starter locked in through 2027. Add another one to the list. That is a $22 million deal over 3 years in terms of total value. Only 12.5 of it is guaranteed. Guaranteeing a little more than half of the contract is pretty normal for Brzezinski, but that's such a low number compared. I mean, 22 mil ain't what it used to be, man. That's not Josh Oliver money. So that is a very cheap deal for a guy who gave quite a bit to the Vikings. I made a point earlier last week that the Vikings were losing 4 of their top 6 pressure generators. One of those guys was Eric Wilson. So keeping him back in helps to assuage a lot of those defensive concerns. It's pretty low octane. It's a pretty small deal in terms of the impact that it's going to have on the rest of free agency and stuff, but it felt so important that they get that done. I know he's cheap because linebackers are really cheap. Linebackers are incredibly unvalued in the NFL for some reason. And also, because he's on the wrong side of 30 and, he just had this explosion in Minnesota and only in Minnesota, only on a Brian Flores defense. And maybe that puts him in the same bucket as Jalen Redmond and Josh Metellus, as these guys that unlock on a Brian Flores defense, but were otherwise unremarkable. Or maybe he was a flash in the pan and we're going to regret this later. But if we do, the cost of doing business is not super that much. That we'll see, of course, how the contract details and the cap structure and how the contract structure flows out. We're kind of to the part of the offseason now where we can't keep up with that by the time, we can't keep up with cap space. By the time we know the contract details of the Eric Wilson deal that tells us what impact it has on the cap, we're going to be 4 transactions down the line and we're not going to know anything. So it's not worth trying to track this live to me. If you want to try, go ahead, God bless. But I'm not going to do that. And we'll just kind of keep you updated as we go. So I will see you tonight with whatever else we got to talk about. And as always, Skol.